Podcast sponsors make the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast possible. So let's take a moment to learn more about this season's sponsor, Sonlight. Want the best education possible for your children? Reading to your children offers numerous benefits, including more sophisticated language, greater empathy, the experience of living in other times and places, an increased vocabulary, the opportunity to pass on your values to your children, an increased attention span, higher test scores, and a thrilling homeschool experience for both parents and students. Reading together is the best way to learn. Sonlight, spelled S-O-N, Curriculum is a literature-rich program built on brilliant books to share with your children. Sonlight covers all subjects and all grades from preschool through high school. Sonlight graduates have gone to prestigious schools, including Harvard, Stanford, and Notre Dame. And these thousands of students have enjoyed their homeschool experience along the way. Want a free trial of what a Sonlight education might look like? Request your own Sonlight invitation, and Sonlight will send a free book and schedule to your door. Go to sonlight.com/joyfully today. Sonlight with an S-O-N for your free trial. Sonlight, the program you're guaranteed to love or your money back. Now, on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast with our mom, Misty Bailey. Tips and encouragement for real-life homeschooling is headed your way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 53 of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling, and I am so excited to chat with you guys all today and bring to you an interview from Sarita Holzmann. Sarita is the owner of Sonlight Curriculum, who is also the sponsor of this season of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. And Sarita and I chat about being a reluctant homeschooler. She educates me on what a mission community is, and she shares with us the fears and joys and struggles that she had as she homeschooled her children, and a little bit about the history of the Sonlight Curriculum. And Sarita was such a joy to talk to. I really enjoyed chatting with her about literature and books and Sonlight and missions, and I can't wait to share this interview with you. But before we jump into that, I wanted to remind you guys, as we are entering into homeschool convention season, that the Southeast Homeschool Expo in Atlanta, Georgia is coming up soon. And I will be doing a couple of different presentations at the Southeast Homeschool Expo. I will be doing one on homeschooling with ADHD. I will be doing one on conquering your homeschool fears. And then I'll be doing a session on time management and the homeschool mom. So if you are going to be in the Atlanta, Georgia area from July 25th through July 27th, I would love for you to swing by the Southeast Homeschool Expo and hug your neck and pray with you and talk to you about your homeschool joys and struggles. So be sure to come in and see me if you are going to be there. So without further ado, let's jump right into this episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast with Sarita Holzmann. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling. And I am so excited to share with you guys today an interview with Sarita Holzmann from Sonlight Curriculum. Sonlight is actually our sponsor for this season of the podcast. So I'm super excited to chat with Sarita about all things homeschooling. How are you today, Sarita?
I'm great, and I'm glad to be here as well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, I'm excited. So I was looking into the history a little bit of your family and the company, and I love that not only did you homeschool your children through adulthood, but all of your children who are parents are homeschooling their kids, working with Sonlight, and are using Sonlight. To me, that speaks volumes as a homeschool parent that your children are following in your footsteps. What an accomplishment.
I count it a huge privilege. While I loved homeschooling my own children, the fact that they chose to use Sonlight and go on homeschooling with my kids, with their own children, just feels like an incredible honor. And one of the things my daughter recently said to me was, Mom, I couldn't wait to give them the same experience that I had when I was homeschooled. So it's a delight.
Yeah, I love that. So can you share with us a little bit about your homeschool journey, how you started homeschooling?
I'd be glad to. I'm, of course, I was a reluctant homeschooler. My oldest daughter went to school, to a Christian school, because we lived in Southern California at the time in a missions community. And everybody we all lived on a campus, in the campus's house, blah, 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 in the houses that surrounded a campus. And we all had the same dilemma of what to do with our kids, because where our campus was located was in an area where all the kids were bused to a very substandard school. So it was one of those where we all had kind of the same problem and the same issue. So most of us chose to homeschool. Like I said, I put my oldest into the local Christian school, but then when my son was ready to start school as well, we actually could not afford it because my husband changed agencies and our support dropped. And anyway, it was one of those where, because we were already living pretty close to the bottom anyway, that just was outside of our reach. So my husband, who had gone to speak, he stayed with a homeschooling family and he came home all excited. He said, "Oh, Sarita, this is what we should do with our kids." And I thought, nope, you're not putting me in that box. And no, I don't want to. The schools have figured out how to do it. And by gum, we're going to just stay the course. But when our situation shifted, I thought, oh, I'll try it. I'll try it. And honestly, Misty, I am so, so grateful I did. It was one of those experiences I would not have chosen. But once I was in the middle of it, I was so, so grateful. God gave me the opportunity to do that. It was one of those where I thought, I really got to love my children and I got to learn all the things that we can talk about when you talk about homeschooling. Huge, huge privilege. And I'm so grateful I had the opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. So you were living in a mission community. So that's interesting to me. What exactly is a mission community?
That's a good question. My husband worked with Dr. Ralph Winter at the U.S. Center for World Mission. Dr. Winter was an out-of-the-box thinker who taught missions at Fuller Seminary at the time. And while he was there, he would have students that would come through and he would ask them, what they were doing missions-wise, and they would come back and, anyway, he would ask them where they were serving. And there was one point where he went, I could be here 1,000 years and never meet a missionary to Afghanistan or Malaysia or Indonesia. And it was at that point where he kind of catapulted the whole unreached peoples movement. He went back and studied, and how do we move people from going to the same places again and again, keep going back to Mexico, keep going back to Nigeria, places that were established and had missions compounds. How do we get people to go to the unreached people? So that was really the start of that whole movement. And we had the opportunity to work directly with Dr. Winter, who actually got a Lifetime Achievement Award for transforming how missions were done. Amazing, amazing story.
Oh, I love that. We're going to have to set up a time another day for you to talk with my daughter because she feels led into missions. And that is why I asked about that. I was like, that mission, I was like, I'm going to have to ask her about that and tell my Allison about that. So we'll have to schedule sometime to talk all about missions because I can pick your brain, I'm sure.
I'd be glad to talk. It's a huge passion of mine. And honestly, at Sonlight, we give 50% of our net profits to the unreached peoples of the world. That's just what our focus is, and that's really where our passion is. So I'd be grateful to talk about that.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so Sarita, we are going to jump in with a couple questions I have about your homeschool journey, and then at the end, we're going to take some time and talk about Sonlight. So are you ready to go?
I'll try.
Okay, so the first question I have is, what is one struggle or fear you had regarding homeschooling, and how did you overcome it?
Probably the biggest fear that I had was, would I be able to handle being around my children 24/7? I'm a strong introvert, and I just thought, I think I can do the teaching part. I think I can teach my kids how to read, teach them their letters. I think I can do that. I could do kindergarten math, but I just wasn't sure I could be with them all the time. I need time to recharge, and how we got around that was, in the beginning, they did kind of hover, but they got to the point where after spending so much intense time with them, because we would homeschool all morning, and then they would go off and play. They were glad to go off. And in the beginning, we had some dear friends who actually offered to watch our kids in the evening so we could get away every so often. So that's kind of how we solved that dilemma. And it ended up being totally a non-issue, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have heard, I can't remember, I had an interview with another person who, can't remember who it was, who had talked about being an introvert while homeschooling, and her husband was an introvert too. So they had these two introverts, and they had like 6 or 7 kids, and they were always just on top of them. And she said that was one of the biggest struggles she had too. And so I love hearing from people who are completely different from me. I like my kids on top of me all the time. Like, I'm a big, big extrovert. So it's interesting hearing other perspectives.
And if in a perfect world, I'd love to be one. So I wish I could be like you, but I'm just not.
Yeah. Well, God created us all differently for a reason.
That's true.
Okay. So the next question, Sarita, is what is one thing you learned on your homeschool journey as a homeschool mom?
I think beyond, and this is so strange because you actually all go through school and you do learn a lot. But I think I really learned a lot more history, and I learned geometry, all those things that I thought, I don't think I totally understood them the first time through. So going through those was just a positive. I think I got to the point where I thought, I could actually even answer some of the questions on Jeopardy. But more than that, I think I really learned to love my children. You know, being with them all day long, I thought, I just like who they are. You get a chance to see them in so much depth and in so many interesting ways, and you get to see them learn and discover. Oh my goodness, huge, huge privilege.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really not, I don't know if counterintuitive is the right word, but it completely goes against our current culture, the loving being around your children, because so many times people in today's society really push for their children to go away or go to school, and they don't really get to know their kids. And that is one thing I think that homeschooling has that it really allows parents to experience truly getting to know their kids on a deeper level than you ever could if they were away from you for 8 hours a day.
I so agree. When it gets to be close to September and you see the cartoons that come out, you know, the moms can't wait for the school bus. Honestly, it breaks my heart. I think, what a lost opportunity. You have a chance to get to know these unique, precious children that have been entrusted to you. I mean, so sad. Oof.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way every year. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart for the parents, because I think that they don't really understand. They don't know what a real homeschool life is like and what joy you can have from being around your kids every day. But also it breaks my heart for the kids, because they pick up on that. And that is just heartbreaking to me.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
So, okay, Sarita, one question I ask all of my podcast guests is, how did you find joy in your homeschool day?
I think the model I used for homeschooling led to a lot of joy. Just sitting around reading books with my kids, talk about a fun and a wonderful experience. I've always been an avid reader. I've been someone who would go to the library and check out as many books as they'd let, and I had little saddlebags on my bike, and I'd bike home and just read. So to be able to share the books that I had loved as a kid with my own children, what a blast. And honestly, I used it as a carrot with my kids. You know, we're going to get our math done, we're going to get our spelling done, we're going to get our language arts done, and then we get to read. And I'm here to tell you that they could not wait to sit down and read great books together. So the model of learning together was just so much fun.
Oh, I love that. And I would love to see a picture of your bike with the little saddlebags on the side, because that sounds like something my kids would love. We have always loved books, and I've always encouraged a love of reading in my kids. And it's always been really important to me. And I love sharing the books I read as a kid now with my kids. And it really is a wonderful way to learn. So you said that you really, really loved reading with your kids, and that model led to the joy in your homeschool. So is that one reason why you guys started Sonlight?
uh, Partially. My husband and I, again, were on a missions and that missions community, and my backyard neighbor and our children played together. And she came to me one day. She had been home from the field from being in Northern Africa. She was home on furlough, and she came to me, she said, Sarita, if you think it's tough to homeschool here, it is 10 times as hard to homeschool overseas. Again, going back to Dr. Renner, who was pushing people to places where there were no schools, there was nobody to meet you at the airport, there were no resources at all. These moms had to homeschool their kids. So she came to me and she said, Sarita, what we need to do, she's kind of imperial, we being the royal we, we need to pick the best of the best, put it in boxes for friends of mine and send it overseas. She said, because the second main reason people came home from the field was they didn't know what to do with their kids' education. Number one reason was they couldn't figure out how to get along with each other. It's tough. You're living in a strange place and there's just a lot of resistance. And I thought, I can't do anything for that. But I thought, I'm a relatively organized person. I can probably do that in the afternoon while my kids are napping. So that's really how it started. And then, and then after we'd been in business for half a year, we'd been shipping off boxes around the world. I thought, this might be a good thing for people stateside as well. So that's really where Sonlight started. It was to serve people and keep them on the field for one more year by making education easy. That was the goal.
Wow. I have never heard that story.
Oh, well.
I mean, I haven't. That is amazing. So you really started Sonlight as a mission field yourself, actually, to serve missionary families.
Totally how we started. Absolutely true.
Oh,
it was,
go ahead.
And it was one of those where we didn't advertise at all. So Misty, in those days, it was so much fun. You'd get a sale, let's say, for example, in Kansas City, you'd get a sale from there. And then all of a sudden you'd have 10 friends would tell friends. I mean, it was just totally, because it was so different. It was so novel, and it was honestly painless way to learn.
Oh, I love that. And I know I'm going to share a little bit about when we first started homeschooling, we would always get the Sonlight catalogs in the mail. And it was always, we've never used Sonlight, like the instructional guides, but we would always get the Sonlight guides in the mail. And it was always on my bucket list, someday I'm going to be able to do Sonlight. Someday I'm going to be able to, and I always felt like, I couldn't do it. It just seemed like so much, but I would take the book list from your guys's guide every year, and I would go through and I would make a list and read those books with my kids. And I wish then I would have had a family that I knew who use Sonlight, because now I have a lot of friends who do it, who use Sonlight, and they talk about how easy it is. But at the time, we were really the only homeschooling family in our area. So it seemed somewhat overwhelming, but I did always use your guys' book recommendations, and we still do. And I cannot say enough good things about the books you guys recommend. But let's talk about the living books and those parents who maybe look at the catalog and feel like, I don't really know how a Sonlight education would actually work. How do you use these books to teach your kids? And it seems like a lot, but I know now that it's not as overwhelming as what it may first look like. So can you kind of talk to those parents and explain how exactly Sonlight works?
I'd be glad to. We basically start with a history theme, because I feel like getting a flow of how history works is super important, even from a very young age. A lot of schools, of course, focus on social studies, which is just chunks of time. You study China for a while, or you study the North American Indians, or whatever it might be. But I feel like getting that flow of history from beginning to end. So starting in third grade, all of the titles are super linked. So when you're reading in your history book and you read about Paul Revere, you meet him in the readers your kids are reading, and in the read-alouds you're reading to your children. It's all linked. So the kids have this connections that are happening all kinds of ways in their brain. So that's what the instructor's guides do. Schedule it all out. We tell you exactly what to do every day, so when you're done. because we've worked out exactly what you need to do. So we tell you what passages in the Bible to read. We tell you what verses for your kids to memorize. We tell you what to read in your history book, what books your kids should read to make all those unique connections. We tell you exactly how many pages to read in your read aloud. And if it doesn't get more anal than that, we also do that for science. So we think through what we want kids to study in all the science arenas. And then we find books that are found on the shelves of bookstores that are going to be winsome and compelling, and books that kids just want to pick up and read. And we read those as well. And then we link all of those science books with experiments that we provide all the supplies for as well. We really do try to make it as doable and easy as for moms as we can make it. That's our goal. And then we picked what we think is the best of the best math, and we put that in our packages, and we pick the best of the best handwriting and spelling, and we schedule that all out as well. So moms, when they get done with a day, when they finish school for the day, they know they have done what they need to do. I used my IG every day when I was teaching my kids. I wrote them, but to have it there and know exactly what to do every day, wow, that was easy.
Yeah, and I love that. And I've since, like I said, I've seen the instruction guides, I've seen how they work, and I can really see how they would be very beneficial, open and go, to a new homeschool mom just starting out. Like I said, when I first started it seemed overwhelming, but I can assure any moms out there thinking about it that I have friends who've used it, and it is not as overwhelming as it seems. And it really is open and go is what I have heard time and time again from my friends who use it.
And to be fair, it is a lot. When you get a box from Sonlight, it's about 60 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
The FedEx man brings, and honestly, we've heard stories of FedEx men delivering boxes, and the kids are inside the house jumping up and down and say, "What is it? Is it Christmas gifts?" And they're going, "No, it's our curriculum." Gotta love it.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. So, like I said, I have went through your guys's catalog and pulled out books to read with my kids, and I hope that's okay, because I love your suggestions. And I know that you guys review each year over 300 books, right? How do you do that? What do you look for when you're selecting those high quality books that you guys offer?
Oh man, I probably read more than let me say I review way more than 300 a year. I probably read I probably read a book a day, actually. And I have a team that goes through all the catalogs that are out there out of the big publishing companies, and they take every recommendation and they request all the samples. So if you came to my house, you might wonder how I fit all the bookcases in. It's tuck them in every corner that you can. So I look for a lot of different things. I'm looking for, we have a 7 standards of things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for realistic characters, people who just come to life, and they're memorable. Boy, I think Caddy Woodlawn is one that always comes to mind. She's just one of those gals who, goes out and makes a difference in her world, but with a heart of compassion and growing personality. And that would be an example of a character who's just really growing. So that's number one. I'm looking for character development. You want somebody who's getting better over the course of the book, not necessarily somebody who's getting worse. Because again, we want to give our kids examples of people to follow, people to emulate, people to look up to. And of course, none of the characters are perfect, right? They're always have snafus that happen, but then they figure out how to move forward and to grow from that. That's the ultimate goal of what you're looking for. I want to look for, a lot of times I'm looking for content that adds to a reader's cultural literacy. And what I mean by that is just the understanding of things that are happening around the world that aren't always explained. For example, let's see if I can give one. E.R. Hirsch had a book called Cultural Literacy, and he used an example in there of college students who were taking a test for him. And one of the questions was about love, generically about love. And all the kids could answer because they could decode the paragraph that was there. They could figure out what love meant, and they could answer all the questions. Then he had a second paragraph about Grant meeting Lee at Appomattox Station. And the kids who did not know that that took place in the Civil War could not answer those questions. So cultural literacy is that information that authors expect you to know, but you don't necessarily know until you're widely read, right? You don't know, there's no test, there's no list that can say, oh my goodness, you need to know this, in order to be a culturally literate person. So that's the goal. You always want to give kids the framework and the understanding of how the world works. That's kind of cultural literacy. So that's 3. 4, I want it to have an engaging, intriguing, multi-dimensional plot. It has to be a compelling story. The story has to pull you through, and you have to want to find out how it resolves, and it has to have a climax and all those things that really well-written stories have. So the plot has to be good. Another one is it has to be emotionally compelling. You have to get it done with and go, oh man, that touched my heart. I'll remember that, because those are the stories we remember forever, right? The ones that you kind of go, oh my goodness, I liked how that resolved. I like what happened there. And don't we remember those kinds of stories? Anyway, it has to be verbally beautiful. The language can't be full of likes and ums, and just has to be well written with words that are carefully chosen. And we try to pull some of that out in our creative writing, actually. Look for the similes, look for the analogies, look for the things that make this such a good story. Here's an example. Can you find it in there? And then it has to be rereadable. Books that you just love and you want to come back to again and again. And I probably should have stopped in between all of those and let you respond to different points. Can I clarify any of them for you? Sorry.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think that that's the key. We want to have good quality literature for our kids. We want our kids to be able to relate to the characters, to grow as a person, to watch them grow, to be able to connect and truly want to know what happens to these characters. And then, of course, we want good books that our kids are going to want to share with our grandkids and have that connection through the generations. I think everything you said absolutely makes up a quality of a good book. And I love that you guys have already reviewed those books and found the books that we should or could want to read with our kids. And I love that you guys have done that.
And Misty, I want to circle back to a comment you made earlier. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course that's okay. If I can encourage anyone to read, I am more than glad to do that. I don't care if you'd never buy a penny from me. Get our catalog, get our book list, read the books that are in there, spend time with your kids in this very, very precious and special way. Only good will come from it. So yes, I'm grateful you got our catalog. I'm grateful you read a lot of those stories and that you can nod when I mention them by name.
Oh yeah, and I have yet to find a book that we have got from your list that my kids have not enjoyed. Even my middle is not, I don't want to say she's not a reader, because she is, like, she loves to read, but she's more of a, hey, I'm going to read all of the books from the nonfiction section of the library and learn everything I can about random animal facts.
I love your daughter.
that is my middle. But even I've still pulled from your catalog books related to animal characters or historical books that include animals, and I've still pulled those books from, I can't think, I'm off the top of my head, I know Rascal, Shiloh, of course, all of the Marguerite Henry books. Off the top of my head, I know those are some of the ones that she's really enjoyed. But I have yet to find a book that they do not enjoy. So the last question I want to ask you is, what have you found the biggest benefits from a literature-based education? What would you say the biggest benefit to homeschooling families is from a literature-based education?
Well, that's a good question. I think I could probably give you a list of 25 things, but I'll try to synthesize it down. I think literature conveys information in a really enjoyable format. I never had to twist my kids' arms to come and sit and listen to a story. It was one of those where, again, I used it as a carrot. Come and get your other work done, because we do need to do our math, we do need to spell, we do need to, all of those things. But to sit and read, wow, they could not wait. And honestly, most days they said, oh, would you please keep on reading? Will you talk about painless learning? What an easy way to keep going. It's and I think it's because stories are they just touch us. They get to the inner core. And honestly, Jesus used stories when he taught. He always used a story to teach. So we know that model actually works. It conveys information in ways that are really, really painless. We don't have to worry about it at all. And it's in a format that's really easy to remember. We can remember stories that we heard as a child. I can still remember my teacher, I probably was in first grade, and she read to us Beautiful Joe. which is this really old, out of date, old story. But I still remember the story. And it's one of those you think, that's a long, long time ago. But stories stick with us. They bring to life the things that happen in history. They bring to life things that are happening around the world in ways that are memorable and easy to hold on to. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that reading with our kids is one of the best ways we can spend time with them. And I hope that one day my kids look back on their homeschool journey and they remember those books, they remember the connections, they remember snuggling up together and just reading. And I think that there's nothing better, like you said, there's absolutely nothing better that we could do with our kids. And one thing I also want to mention is, as I'm going through, I went back through the catalog and I'm like looking, and because we were talking earlier about missions, is I want to also mention, because we have been going through the missionary stories, True Christian Heroes, this year for our homeschool. We're kind of going through them during our morning time, and you guys include some of those in each of your history selections, correct?
That is totally true. And that's purposeful. My goal is to give kids an example of godly heroes. I think there's a ton of people that are held up as heroes that I actually don't want my children to follow. You know, they might be good sports players, or they might be good actors or actresses, but I don't necessarily want my children to emulate them. What I want them to model their lives after are missionaries who choose to go to these foreign places, who are just totally ordinary people and do amazing things for God. That if I can give my kids that idea that even ordinary people can do great things, I feel like I've really succeeded.
I love that. Even ordinary people can do great things. I love that. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think that's wonderful. Even ordinary people. I'm writing it down so I can, put it on a quote. But those stories really do. We have learned so much from going through those missionary stories, and I absolutely have loved them. I've loved learning about the characters. I've loved learning about the countries. Well, they're not characters, they were real people. Mm-hmm. I've loved learning about the countries where they served. And it has been a wonderful year just studying those missionary stories. And I know many of my followers have asked me which ones have been my favorite, which ones we've liked. And a lot of them have never heard of those. So that's why I wanted to make sure I mentioned that you guys use them in your history core, your history selection. So I want to mention that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think too, literature allows us to interact in really unique ways with our kids. I know when my kids were grown, we chose to go camping as a family. And when we camp, as when they were kids, we always read around the campfire, right? Their dad would read in the evenings. And I said, so what would you like Dad to read while we're gone? And these are right there in college, or they're in college. And they said, oh, I think I'd like to read again Charlotte's Web, which is part of our first grade program. So we sat around the fire as mainly adults, and we all cried when the spider died. I'm thinking, these are unique and precious memories we have with our kids based on stories we've had connection with through the things that we've read. It's an enormous privilege.
Yeah, and that's so funny. And then I really am going to stop because we went over it. But I remember though, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Charlotte's Web, I read that with my oldest when she was, we had just started homeschooling. So she would have been 5, almost 6. And so that was whenever I first started homeschooling, and I got your guys' catalog in the mail, and I had seen it recommended, and I thought, Charlotte's Web, I loved that book as a kid. Could I really read it with her? She's only 6. And then I'm like, well, yeah, I totally can. And so we read it together. My kids were 6 and 4, and I did daycare at the time. And we read Charlotte's Web. And then I just read it this year with my son, Daniel, and he just turned 7. And so, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the very first books I chose from your catalog to read with my kids our very first homeschool year.
When your children are grown and they ask you to read it again, remember this story.
Yes, I will. Absolutely. Well, Sarita, this has has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I feel like we were maybe a little all over the place, but I hope everybody enjoyed learning more about Sonlight and more about literature selections and your homeschool journey, and definitely the mission history, because I did not know that at all. And I'm so thankful that you shared that with us. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
The best way to get in touch with us is, of course, our website, www.sonlight.com. We have, if you're at all interested, we have advisors that are Sonlight moms who are more than willing to get on the phone with you and help you figure out where to start and what to pick and all kinds of things. They would just be delighted to talk you all through that and give you the best information they can from their own personal experience. We have great customer service people. They'll just bend over backwards to do whatever you might need to have help with that. So just contact our office and get our catalog. And I hope you catch the vision and at least read to your children. And if you feel so called, give Sonlight a try. We have probably the best guarantee in the business. You can try us for half of a year and send it back if you don't love it. It's just amazing. So please feel free to try it and see if it doesn't work for you as well.
And you guys will also be at conventions this season too?
Not me personally. As an introvert, that actually killed me.
I wondered about that. I was going to hit you up and talk questions if you were.
I used to, and I just thought, oh, please don't make me. But we do. We have wonderful Sonlight moms who choose to go to conventions and represent us. And they're awesome. If you have a chance to meet them, make sure you go to the booth and just talk to all of them. They're great people.
Oh, okay. Well, Sarita, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me, even as an introvert. So you have been so full of wisdom.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Blessings on you, and thank you for encouraging homeschooling moms, and thank you for what you do. I appreciate it.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. So what did you guys all think? I loved the wisdom that Sarita shared, and I love her desire behind starting the curriculum, Sonlight, and I really was excited to learn the reason why she started Sonlight Curriculum with wanting to serve missionary families. That is something new. I never knew that about Sonlight, and I love hearing the why behind the homeschool curriculum publishers that we all use and love, because I think it truly lets us get a peek into their heart and a peek into their passion for homeschooling and their desire to serve homeschooling families. I also love that she shared that all of her children now who have kids are homeschooling. I think that speaks volumes to her ability as a homeschool mom, or not her ability, but I think that speaks volumes about the effect that she had on the lives of her children by homeschooling them, that they are all now homeschooling themselves and serving in their communities and missions or working with Sonlight. So I love that. And again, you guys be sure to go to sonlight.com/joyfully to get your free trial of the Sonlight Curriculum, and just tell them thank you for sponsoring this podcast and for keeping it on the air. And just know that by purchasing Sonlight or supporting Sonlight, you are also supporting missionary families, which again, I never knew. And I loved learning that about Sonlight and their mission behind homeschooling and just their desire to just love on those who are out there being the hands and feet of Jesus. And I just love that. So that is it for this episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. Again, be sure to go to sonlight.com/joyfully and get your free trial of Sonlight. So now, sweet mamas, you can head out there and have a more joyful homeschool. Have a blessed and wonderful day, guys. Thanks. Bye. This has been an episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. I thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take the time to leave a rating or review on iTunes or whatever platform it is that you use to listen to this podcast. That tells the powers to be I'm not talking to myself. Also, hit subscribe. Then you will catch every episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast each week right there in your podcast feed. You can find show notes and more at joyfullyhomeschooling.com and clicking on the episode number of the episode you are looking for. Thanks, guys. I hope this podcast encouraged you to head out there and have a more joyful homeschool.